Good evening. Welcome to Larry Rinker Golf Live. I'm pleased to be joined this evening by my longtime friend, Mr. Stan Utley. It's always great to catch up with Stan. Stan and I have been friends for well over 30 years. I have a new book that's out and thought I had a slide for it, but I guess I don't. But you can find out more about Stan at stanutley.com. But Stan, always great to catch up with you. I know you're up at Maroon Creek in Aspen. It's been cold. We had a snow day on Tuesday here, so pretty rare to snow on September 8th.
Well, it's been thanks for having me, Larry. And it's been an incredibly good weather summer for those of us who teach golf in Colorado. We had, unfortunately, almost no rain, which led to some fires, but it's been interesting to go from 82 on the weekend to 2 or 3 inches of snow the last couple of days up here. But today it warmed back up, the snow's gone, got to hit some balls, and looking forward to getting back to teaching tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. I think we got a little rain here in the forecast in the Vail area, but it's going to be a beautiful weekend. It's going to warm up. The next couple of weeks are still going to be great. I think September is the best month of the year to be in Colorado. So Stan, I'm gonna throw up some video of me here, and so I've got these two shots here. I'm basically showing a high trajectory shot on the left and a low trajectory shot on the right. And I think a lot of people don't really understand. You can see that 80 degrees. So I'm probably leaning that shaft forward about 10 degrees. And then here, 88, just got 2 degrees of lean here. But there's really kind of two different releases that I teach. So with the high trajectory, we're letting that club pass the left arm and hand, that left wrist cupping or going into extension. And then with the low shot, we're not letting the club pass the left arm as much. And I think, just real simply, this is just a simple way for people to understand the differences in how do you hit a ball high and how you hit a ball low around the greens.
Well, it's interesting that one of the things that I try to explain to people is the relationship between the ball flight, the face, and the hands and wrist and forearms. And, I feel like I don't know exactly what you did there relative to your backswing. Obviously, you set up slightly different.
Right.
But, when I take it back for a higher shot, my right palm rolls open slightly in the backswing, which is like hitting a ping pong shot or a tennis shot, kind of like a drop shot.
So kind of like this.
So that's probably a more open face than you're going to have on your low shot.
Right. So the low shot's not as open, is it?
That's right. It didn't hinge up as high. It kind of went back more in and shut.
Right.
So I like to say that there's a little bit of loading of the club, and then the unloading of the club on the downswing is basically just trying to return your wrists back to where they were at address. But the unloading would be a little more palm down on the low shot and a little more palm up on the high shot.
I like that. I think, this low shot, the knuckles of the left hand are a little more turning down, aren't they?
And I feel like that's how I would hit a low top spinner with a ping pong paddle.
Right. And then the higher shot, the right hand's releasing a little more under, isn't it?
That's how I feel it.
Yeah.
That engages the bounce more. It adds a little loft. And the pivot point of the top of the grip happens earlier.
Right. Right. So where the shaft would be kind of straight up and down, probably about right here, is where that's going to happen earlier than where this shaft is straight up and down right here.
I agree.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think, people watching this and seeing you make this swing is you have, sometimes I call it 2 pounds. It's not a lot of weight shift to the left,
Right.
but it's obvious you're not leaning backwards on either shot to help this ball in the air. You're keeping your pressure on your left foot a little more than your right foot. And I hesitate. Sometimes I say that and somebody picks their right heel up off the ground. I didn't say take your foot off the ground,
Right.
but it's a left-sided dominant swing.
Well, one thing I think that you and I agree with, and the guys I consider the great short game shot guys, is that we really get steep into the ball by having our weight in our left foot and our shoulders kind of level. And we get shallow with letting the throwing motion of the right hand. And you also love somebody standing up. So notice how, if anything, I'm getting a little taller there as I throw it.
Totally agree with that.
And
I like to say the body has a levering action and the club has a levering action. And when my left knee extends and I come out of hip bend slightly on the downswing, or particularly after the hit, maybe not so much on the downswing, but through the ball, I lever up, and that helps the club head lever down.
Right. So you'll see that I'm not going down at all. I mean, that's kind of the worst thing we see, isn't it? Somebody, the right knee going down and the head going down, coming into the ball.
And I think I tell that person, I said, you may not realize you're going down, but if you add angle instead of release angle out of your wrist on the downswing, you must go down or dip, or you would whiff. Because when you're adding angle, you're shortening the distance between you and the club head.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up one of these students I had in the last week here that I probably deleted it, but it's
if there's other teachers watching this, I think one of the things we have to always do is somehow know what it is our students believe.
right.
And I had a student the other day that said, but if I raise up, I'm going to top it. And I returned back to him. I said, so you mean for 2 years you haven't believed me and you didn't tell me? Right. And then as soon as I knew that he hadn't been believing me and hadn't been trying to do what I said, I immediately convinced him to do it, and he hit every shot solid.
Well,
but I didn't know he wasn't trying to do what I was telling him.
Yeah. Well, I think when we look at short game, it's really that upper core swing sequencing where we let the club go past our chest, just like an upper core player, and the right arm straightens early and we stand up. That's what an upper core player does. And there's a measuring to the ball. So as our upper body's going back, our right arm is straightening. And that's really great for short game. But guys trying to hold angle and go down, that's the only way they can measure to the ball. That story doesn't normally end well, does it?
Well, one of the favorite people I've ever got to help, he only had one weakness in his game, and that was easy chips. That was Mr. Garcia.
Really?
So, Sergio's got that lag in his golf swing.
Ooh, that's.
And the only weakness that his team and I really ever found in his game was the easy chip shot. And it wasn't hard to talk him into doing it well, but that shot gives him more trouble than the rest of the game just because of the move you just did.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people try to put into their short game what they do in their swing. So if they're pretty rotated and lagging the club, they kind of think, well, that's kind of the way I should hit a pitch shot. And it's really not the best technique. The best technique, and I believe you and James Siekman and Kevin Lazarus, we all believe that the best way to hit a shot, it's really as intuitive as hitting a shot with just one hand and just feeling the motion of what happens. Now it feels underhanded here, but as the club passes, the face is going to rotate. But that to me is the best sequencing for short game. That's what Sevi did. And
It actually happened on tour today, and the announcers didn't know what to do with it.
Really?
One of the players I saw, I glanced at the guys in Napa, and the player made a two-handed practice swing, and then when he hit his little soft chip, about the one you just hit there, he hit it one-handed with his right hand. Almost hold it. They were like, "What did he do? What was that?"
Well, the thing is, and I remember when you were out at Red Sky a few summers ago, you were the first one to tell me, hey, you wanted to train what your left arm and hand did. And there's the left arm and hand and the club passing the left arm where the left wrist cups or goes into extension. And then the left arm and hand folds as it goes up. And that's what you want. So many people are dragging that handle and not throwing it. And that throwing it, Stan, as you know, look, I'm hitting this shot with what? 3 degrees of lean? How much bounce do I have? I have bounce. Yeah. So I can use the bounce.
You have about 9 degrees of bounce if you got 12 degrees on that club.
Right.
The one thing you did with both those swings one-handed that our students are struggling with so much is they do not know how to let their left elbow absorb some of the through swing because they drag their arm and the grip
like
straight.
Drag
drag it straight toward the target.
Yep. Instead of letting it go, letting it go.
The left elbow's got to give a little bit and slide around the corner on the arc instead of straight down to the target line.
Right. But I'm sure you've seen some people like I have that are really struggling with pitching the ball. And
every day,
to me, it's just as simple as learning how to control the club with your left arm and hand, learning how to control the club with your right arm and hand. And I think it's very intuitive if you just take it in your trail arm and hand, your right arm and hand, and let it go. And if you observe what you're doing, you and I were talking about Fred Shoemaker before we came on the air, and Fred said something to you that you probably won't ever forget. And what was that?
Well, he was giving a talk and he was describing the fact that he had a re-gripping issue where he would turn loose of his grip and re-grip it, but he didn't know it. And the comment that stuck in my head that Fred said was, he said, as an instructor, if we can get our student to experience in the moment their error, they have the ability to change it. But what happens normally, you don't really experience in the moment because it's normal.
Right. So
it sometimes is baffling to my student when I try to get them to make their bad swing on purpose and feel it. They're like, I didn't want to do that. I'm like, you have to know that you actually do that every time unconsciously before you can change it. That was a powerful statement Fred made.
No, it is. And a lot of us, you and I did it when we were playing the tour. We maybe weren't even experiencing things we were doing in our swing. And so we're trying to change something that we didn't really even experience what we were doing. But you said something I think that's great about our students. And I think all teachers we all should interview our students. I'm always asking my students, what are you thinking about when you swing a club? Or what are you thinking about when you're trying to hit this pitch shot or this sand shot? And a lot of times there's a virus in the computer up here that what they're trying to do is really not what you and I believe to be the best way to do it or the best technique for them.
One of the questions I ask them, so if you were giving a lesson to somebody who had never played, what would you tell them?
Oh, that's a great one. I love that.
Right? And they kind of stumble like they don't know. And then eventually they start talking, and then they're very revealing to me what they think or what they're trying to do or what I know they've heard in the past.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that that I do with my students, and I think you'll agree with this, but I call it, these 4 myths of this open face sand wedge. That you control the distance with your pivot. You hinge and hold that angle between your left arm and the shaft of the club. You turn through the ball and you keep the club face open. That really doesn't happen when we are just letting the club have a free orbit.
Yeah, I think I do control some of the shot with my pivot, but I let the club head, as I like to explain it, early club head acceleration is the key to good short game. And kind of the way that I backed up what I believed was Dr. Tom Mace is a brilliant professor out of Cal Poly, where my son just graduated, and he's very knowledgeable about golf. And I had him explain the pendulum to me. And when the pendulum drops, maximum acceleration happens at the beginning of the drop, and it declines acceleration until 0 at the bottom, and then it's decelerating on the way up. And so many of our students have been programmed through what they've learned or studied or thought was logical was to accelerate through the ball. When you and I get to the ball, we're almost 0 acceleration because we've already come up to speed early in the pitch. If I'm hitting a shot and I need to swing 14 miles an hour to throw it out there 20 or 30 feet, I bet I've gone from 0 to 12 miles an hour halfway in the downswing, and the other half's a coast mode.
Right. So the club head's not getting any faster. It's just staying 12 to 14, isn't it?
Right. It's barely speeding up the last foot of the swing. It's not surging in speed. It's already come up to speed. And I think one of the things that, people would tell you and they would tell me we have good hands. And what I figured out was, because we've gone in coast mode at the bottom, we actually get to use our hands for finesse.
Right.
They're using their hands for acceleration, but we've already done with that.
Well, that's why that's why I just love
secret to
feeling a
short
free
game.
orbit of the club head. Anybody just grab the club, barely hang on to it, feel the weight of the club head, feel it swinging back and through, and you're going to experience what you're talking about, aren't you?
It's physics. You're either letting physics happen good for you, or you're not letting it happen. You're fighting it.
Well, Stan, you're not only a short game guru, you're a putting guru. And since we're on these myths, I believe that there's 5 myths in putting. So how many times do you interview somebody and say, well, how do you putt? Or what would you tell somebody if you were given a putting lesson? And here they are, that you putt with your shoulders. You don't use your arms and hands, or your hands and wrists. You keep the triangle. It's a pendulum, stroke, or rhythm. You got to aim perfectly. To me, I just want to blow all those up.
I would agree.
And I loved it.
The funny one is, I finally got Golf Digest to write an article, and I said, people would say, keep the triangle. And I'd say, where's the wide end? And they'd always say the shoulders. And I got an article in Golf Digest that said you need to turn your triangle upside down and make the wide end the end that's swinging.
So what you're saying is, everybody wants to talk about this triangle right here, but you're saying, hey, when you stroke a putt, the putter's going to go from here to here. Here's the real triangle, right?
Yeah, or you could put the top up there above your belly button.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not, the triangle doesn't, the point's not at the top of the grip, but it's also not, it's also not 25 feet above you. The guy that drags the grip, his triangle somewhere way up in space. It ain't that high either.
Right. But it's interesting how that's kind of the culture, to putt with the shoulders, don't use your hands and wrists, keep the triangle, and it's a pendulum, stroke, or rhythm. And
surely with all these good shows you've done, they don't talk about that anymore. Whoever they are.
We're trying to change the landscape, because we got the handle draggers with short game, pull, turn, hold the face open. That's not what you and I teach, or Seekman, or the top short game coaches, Stockton. And we're also talking about with putting, I want people to find their natural strokes. Just like if I'm swinging a hammer, I'm not worried about how much I'm trying to use my hands and wrists. I use the example all the time in putting, Stan, where I say to people, have you ever hit those little nails and those little hooks and hung pictures in your house with that drywall? So you got the hammer, and if you're using this hammer the way you're trying to putt, you're trying to turn your shoulders and use your shoulders to hit the nail in instead of just going tap, tap, tap and tap the nail in. And so many people are drinking that Kool-Aid. Unfortunately, it's still a large part of the culture. And I just like people putting, looking at the hole and seeing what happens, and find your natural stroke instead of trying to find some stroke that doesn't even match you.
It'd be too easy if they were tapping it in.
It would be it's just too easy to do that. But it's, unfortunately, this is still out there a lot. Brings you and I a lot of business. I mean, how many people have you helped by just giving them permission to use their hands and wrists some?
All of them.
All of them. And how many strokes have you lengthened in putting? Not many, right?
All of them.
You've lengthened all of them or shortened all of them?
I've lengthened all their backswings and shortened all their follow-throughs.
Right. So you like that, Mr. Lanning, your old coach, you like that kind of dead weight. Just let the putter head kind of fall on the back of the ball, right?
That's right. You gotta pick it up high enough that the dead weight gets it to the speed required to get it to the hole.
Right. But, it's just interesting how we have all this stuff with putting, and yet, they're just missed. The one that I like is you have to aim perfectly. I don't know when guys start putting lines on their balls, and, it used to be a line on your putter was a custom order. Now it's a custom order to get it without it, seems like. But I loved it. A few years ago, you told me, you said, I love my stroke when I return that putter face 1.7 degrees open. And it's really about what stroke you repeat, isn't it, Stan?
It's about getting the face squared impact. That's all that matters.
To the start line, where you want to start it.
That's right.
David Orr talks about grandpa's gun. So if grandpa's gun's shooting high and right, well, I just need to learn how to aim it low and left to hit my target. And
That's right.
I believe great putters really learned how to aim their stroke.
And I think, the good and the bad is we learned it early.
Right. Just out on the putting green.
And I think our job is to sometimes try to reprogram a stroke that was never given permission to be natural. Sometimes these kids come and I'm like, did you not ever putt and not try? Right?
Right.
They've been trained to make a perfect stroke instead of make putts.
Well, they've been trained to be a robot and rigid instead of being adaptive. And hey, where do I want to start this ball? And
I'm a bit of a heckler, and I'll have to say sometimes I'm not that nice to the daddies that I realize have caused that.
Yeah, they're kind of don't really know what to say when the son looks at them like, well, Dad, that's what you told me. You told me to putt with my shoulders, not use my hands and wrists, keep the triangle, and it's pendulum, stroke, or rhythm. I got to aim perfectly. But it's interesting how when you free people up, I mean, the feel hand's your right hand, Stan. So if you tossed a ball, what would your hand and wrist do? You'd have some hand and wrist. So to think that I'm going to toss a ball with my shoulders seems ludicrous to me.
I'm in your ballpark.
You're in my ballpark. Well, it's just interesting how really when it comes to short game and putting, how we have these myths. And I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from James Seekman, David Orr with putting. He's got 3D. We've learned in 3D that we don't keep the triangle. There are hands and wrists. The shoulders move, but I ask my students all the time, Stan, name one thing in life that your shoulders control what your arms, hands, and wrists are doing and whatever you're holding. You sign your,
That's how I sign my name, Larry.
yeah, sign your name. Do you sign it, your shoulders going like this to try and sign your name? Okay. I mean, do you eat with your shoulders? Let's see, how do I get it up there? Or do you tie your shoes with your shoulders? And, it's just amazing that our hands are the most important part of our bodies. And so many people, unfortunately, have been misled that the big muscles control the little muscles. And you and I believe it's the opposite. We better know what our arms, hands, and wrists are doing.
My buddy Rob Akins told me one time, he said, "You're a slave to your hands."
I like that.
If my hand goes to reach something, my whole body responds. My hands don't respond to my shoulders going for the apple. My shoulder responds for my hand to pick up the apple. It's a good way to look at it.
No, that is very well said. And that's a great end to the show. And Stan, always great to have you on the show, my friend.
Thanks for stretching my technology capability.
Well, I'm always going to try and do that with you, Stan. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Tideless FootJoy, the Ritz-Carlton Golf Club Orlando, the Red Sky Golf Club in Vail, Colorado, FlightScope V1, Right Balance, and Stan Utley. You can find out about Stan. You can go see him at Greyhawk in the Phoenix area, stanutley.com. Stan, stay warm up there in Aspen. How many more weeks are you going to be there?
Just about another week or 10 days.
Yeah, I'm here 2 more weeks, so we're kind of on the same schedule. It's about time to head for some warmer weather, isn't it?
I'm headed east.
All right. Well, till next week. Thanks for listening to Larry Rinker Golf Live, and keep swinging.
See ya.